Your brain contains a default program, a hidden neural circuit that can actually override your deepest moral convictions when faced with a command. This isn't a malfunction, it's an evolutionary inheritance, a powerful psychological mechanism capable of transforming ordinary individuals into agents of profound ethical compromise. It dictates how you respond to authority, how you perceive responsibility, and how your personal conscience can be silenced under specific social pressures. You are about to understand the terrifying mechanics of obedience, how authority reshapes your perception of right and wrong, and why your sense of self can sometimes dissolve under pressure. We will peel back the layers of conscious choice to reveal the subconscious triggers that dictate compliance, forcing you to reevaluate the very nature of human will. Imagine a complex machine with a manual override switch, a human brain designed for independent thought, also possessing a hardwired circuit that bypasses its core programming under specific external signals. This innate predisposition towards deference, known as authority bias, is profoundly rooted in our social nature. From early childhood, we learn that following directives from figures of authority, parents, teachers, elders, often leads to positive outcomes and safety. This ingrained learning establishes powerful cognitive shortcuts, allowing us to offload the burden of constant decision-making and trust those perceived as more knowledgeable or powerful. Our brains, seeking efficiency, create schemas where a command from a recognized authority figure is processed with a reduced level of critical scrutiny. It's a system that usually works to maintain social order and group cohesion, but its power can be terrifyingly misdirected. This profound psychological vulnerability was laid bare in the foundational work of Stanley Milgram in his 1961 Yale University Obedience Studies. He set out to understand how ordinary citizens could participate in horrific acts, not as fanatics, but as compliant cogs in a larger system. Milgram's experiment placed participants in the role of teacher, instructing them to administer what they believed were increasingly painful electric shocks to a learner for incorrect answers. The learner, a Confederate, would cry out, protest, and eventually fall silent as the shock levels escalated. The true subject, the teacher, was faced with a chilling dilemma: continue inflicting pain under the instructions of an experimenter in a lab coat, or follow their own moral compass. The experimenter offered no threats, only calm, insistent directives like, "Please continue," or "The experiment requires that you continue." This wasn't about physical coercion, it was pure psychological pressure. Milgram revealed that a shockingly high percentage of participants, ordinary men from various walks of life, would continue to administer what they believed were agonizing, potentially lethal shocks, simply because a figure of authority told them to do so. The vast majority of participants continued past the point where the learner expressed pain, and over 65% delivered the maximum, supposedly fatal 450-volt shock. This wasn't because they were inherently cruel, it was because the obedience program had been activated. But what happens when that override switch is flipped, not by a malfunction, but by a simple, insistent voice of authority? And what are the true, horrifying ramifications of that neurological default? This is where the mechanism operates, not as a subtle nudge, but as a full-scale moral override. The participants in Milgram's study, ordinary individuals who believed they were good, moral people, were driven to act in ways fundamentally opposed to their self-image. Before the experiment, many would have vehemently denied any capacity for such cruelty. But in the moment, under the direct, repeated instruction of an authority figure, something shifted. Their brains engaged in a complex psychological dance called cognitive dissonance. This is the crushing psychological discomfort of holding two conflicting beliefs: I am a good person and I am hurting someone. To resolve this unbearable tension, the brain often doesn't change the behavior. Instead, it redefines the situation, displacing responsibility. I'm not responsible, they would tell themselves. The experimenter is. Or, the learner agreed to this. They redefined the suffering, minimized its impact, or even rationalized the necessity of following orders for the sake of science. The profound discomfort of acting against one's core values was eased by the cognitive escape hatch of obedience. It's chilling. It's not that these people were suddenly evil, it's that their innate moral compass was effectively jammed by the signal from authority. What would you do if you were in that room, listening to the screams, seeing the suffering? Would you have stopped? This isn't about evil people. It's about a specific environmental trigger activating a fundamental human design. Philip Zimbardo's 1971 Stanford prison experiment further illuminated this chilling phenomenon. In this study, college students were assigned roles as either guards or prisoners in a mock prison environment. Within days, the arbitrary power dynamics and the roles themselves began to override individual personalities and morals. Guards, who were perfectly normal, empathetic individuals outside the experiment, became increasingly authoritarian, abusive, and sadistic. Prisoners became submissive, showing signs of severe psychological distress, believing the simulation was real and inescapable. The experiment had to be cut short after just 6 days due to the extreme psychological harm being inflicted. Here, it wasn't a direct command to harm, but the implicit authority of the role itself that triggered the obedience program and its accompanying moral degradation. The uniform, the title, the perceived power, these external symbols served as the very commands that led to deeply unethical behavior. This wasn't about individual malice, it was about the insidious power of social roles and perceived authority to reprogram our behavioral defaults. It exposes the fragility of individual ethics when confronted by systemic pressure. Understanding this doesn't just explain historical atrocities, it illuminates the subtle power dynamics in your everyday life. You can begin to apply this knowledge to fortify your own moral compass. First, learn to recognize authority cues. Pay attention to uniforms, titles, specific language patterns, or even body language that implicitly demands deference. When someone asserts a directive, whether in a meeting, a social setting, or even an advertisement, actively pause and ask, is this morally aligned with my own values, or am I reacting to the cue of authority? This pause, this deliberate moment of reflection, can be your first line of defense against an automatic obedience response. Don't immediately accept a directive just because it comes from an official source. Second, start developing a personal moral circuit breaker. This means practicing vocalizing disagreement or questioning a directive, even in low-stakes situations. Begin small, challenge a minor assumption, voice a different opinion in a casual conversation, or politely ask for clarification when you feel a nudge toward compliance. This builds the neural pathways for independent moral action, strengthening your capacity to say no when it truly matters. Think of it as exercising a muscle that often lies dormant. The more you consciously engage your critical thinking against implicit authority, the stronger your resistance to its override program becomes. Third, actively challenge groupthink and the collective obedience it often fosters. In group settings, consciously seek out and amplify dissenting opinions. If you're in a position of leadership, create structured opportunities for anonymous feedback or assign a devil's advocate to formally question assumptions. Understand that silence in a group can be interpreted as assent, which can quickly become a powerful form of collective obedience. Actively seek out voices that might be overridden or suppressed, making it safe for individuals to articulate reservations without fear of social reprisal. Consider a recent situation where you felt compelled to agree, even if a small part of you knew it was wrong. What signals were present? How could you have engaged your circuit breaker? You now understand that the line between good and bad behavior is far more permeable than you ever imagined. It's not a fixed internal trait, it's a dynamic interplay between internal values and external pressure. You're not just observing human behavior, you're seeing the intricate, sometimes frightening, mechanisms that drive it. This changes how you perceive not only others' actions, but also your own capacity for both compliance and defiance. The evil isn't in a person, but in the program and in the conditions that activate it. You now possess the insight to see the hidden levers of power and the subtle ways your own brain can be persuaded to conform. This knowledge is not just about understanding, it's about empowerment, about claiming autonomy over your own moral landscape. The obedience program is real, a profound default in your mental architecture. To truly master your mind, to navigate the complexities of social influence, you must first acknowledge its power. Keep exploring these hidden truths, these invisible forces that shape every decision, every interaction. Your journey into the astonishing intricacies of the human brain has only just begun. But what happens when your brain, instead of overriding morals, struggles to form them at all? What if some minds are wired from birth with a different moral compass, or a complete absence of one? The implications are astounding.